Oregon's most lucrative fishery is finally now open, and that's the commercial crab season. At first, it was closed when it should have been open because the crabs didn't seem to have a good hard shell. But now it's open, and there's supposed to be oodles of them out there. It's supposed to be a really super good year for it. The only problem with crab season, it happens in the winter, and so you have the rough seas to contend with. So that's a risk that these commercial crabbers are willing to take as they wallow their way out across Tillamook Bar. These fishermen all have salt water in their veins, and there's no way they could be happy at anything else. A desk job or something like that doesn't sound one bit appealing to these people. They're a hearty bunch of people that are excited about what they're doing. I one time very briefly decided to walk the decks on one of these boats and be a commercial fisherman, but I had 3 small children at home, and that's not a very good life when you're raising a family. Sometimes you go to sea and it might be so rough you can't come in for days. I've made 10-day trips to sea at one time, and you have to anchor out there or sometimes just drift. So it's a real hard way of life. They're moving out right on the bar now, and they're starting to encounter a few of the big swells that are most always on Tillamook Bar during the winter time. They move up and take the challenge on head on, but they have crab pots piled high on their deck, and their cargo shifted, listing them over to one side quite a bit. So they they're they're not exactly doing real well right now with that the boat listing over toward one side. When you have to go to the supermarket or a fish market and buy a crab, it seems like they're very expensive, but just keep this in mind. This is what happens. Their cargo is now shifted and they're listing quite badly. The Coast Guard was right there, so they came to their side. And I think that black smoke is when they were going sort of at an idle. When they hit the gas, probably that's what happened. But I don't know, it seemed a little bit unusual. So they're wallowing around and getting ready to make a U-turn and head back to port. With their load shifting, the only thing they can do is go back to port where they've got some equipment to reload it on the way it should be. I'll bet their hearts were going pitter patter putter when this happened, and so now they're underway to go back to the docks. And they're fortunate the Coast Guard is standing by in case they roll over. But it looks like it gets a little better when they get in. Maybe they've done something to straighten the load out a little bit so they can make it into port. The Coast Guard is in the small boat following him in, just in case worse goes to worse, and they can make a rescue and save the lives of these commercial fishermen. When I went to sea, we had some awful storms, and when you're crabbing out there, it's in the winter months, so you're going to have to figure on that. One time we had a wind come up when we were anchored at night. You don't come into port at night, you just drop anchor or go out into deeper water and just drift during the night time. And we pulled the anchor for, according to our readings, we pulled the anchor, drug the anchor for about 7 miles, but we stayed in about the same depth of water, so we didn't have to worry about crashing into the beach. Even though I no longer walk the decks of a commercial fishing boat, I can still appreciate what these people are going through. A cruel, green, merciless sea pounds at you in a situation like this, and it just won't let up. No matter what you say or do, you just have to hang in there and ride it out. And it looks like they're almost into where the water's not so rough, and the Coast Guard is faithfully standing by. The ordeal definitely isn't over yet. They have to go into the dock and reload their boat on straight and tie it down good and head back to sea. So they still have the challenge of getting over the bar. And this Tillamook bar can be a very rough one. Those crab pots are very heavy, and if they shift, it could just as well roll you right over on the beam end, is what they call it, or the side of the boat. When I was out commercial fishing, we got caught in a storm, and we laid out there running the small gasoline engine we had at full bore from 10 o'clock that morning till about just before dark that evening. It let up enough we could get around the North Jetty at up at the mouth of the Columbia. But meanwhile, we rolled over on the beam end twice. But this boat was a very good sea boat that I was on, and it had one time been a sailor. So when it would roll over, it would right itself, similar to what the Coast Guard boats will do. If they roll over, you just hang on and pretty soon they right themselves. All the doors, windows, and hatches are securely closed when you get in a storm out there, because you don't want the boat getting a bunch of water down below the deck. And there are pumps there. You can pump it out if you get a little in there. The dock is going to look extremely good to these people when they get in there and can get their loads straightened out, so they don't have to list over so bad. Good thing it happened in close to port. If they'd have been way out, they'd have had a lot of trouble. If they were out where they had to run a day to get into port, that would have been really hectic. But the Coast Guard's right there, and if that boat rolls over, the Coast Guard will have the guys in a second. Some of these crab boats are equipped with lights, so they can pull crab pots day and night. We didn't have lights and couldn't do that when I was out there, so we just crabbed during the daylight hours, and we were crabbing out quite a ways. And so when we were to come in, we'd have a day or two's run just to get in. They're in smoother waters now, and all should go well, but the Coast Guard's still hanging in there. You never really know if that load might shift more and roll them over.
you want us to stay to watch and go back out later too?
Well, while I'm in Garibaldi, I decided to go down to the docks where these boats tie up and take a look at their crab pots. These crab pots all have their floats and rope neatly coiled in them, and then you just pop a bait in and throw them out, and they don't have to be checked real often. I think they sometimes uh, can be out there for a few days. And these crab pots are all fixed, rigged up differently. Some of them are for shallower water where they're in closer to the beach. I guess the crabbing might be a little better there. But when we were crabbing out there, we were crabbing at 600 feet deep in water, 600 feet deep, which takes a whole lot of rope. I don't know what these little boats are here putting around the bay, but I saw a couple of them there, and I never figured out exactly what they were for. Several of the crab boats are still tied up to the dock, uh, loading their crab pots and bait and gear and fuel that they'll need for their trip. And there are cranes here to set those crab pots on the boats. Looks like another one's loaded and backing out and getting ready to go out and challenge the mighty Pacific Ocean. I don't know what these fishermen's wives think when they see their husband's boat departing and heading out over the bar. I guess they're just used to it. It's just a way of life, and they know it's a way of life that their husbands enjoy. They really get into it, and all their conversations are about the ocean and fishing and the storms they run into and the different situations they have at sea. I don't know how many days these fishermen will stay at sea, but it'll probably be for numerous days till they get their boat filled with crabs. And so you'd have to have a crew that had something in common. You couldn't have a crew that were arguing, bickering with each other. They wouldn't get their work done right, and it would be miserable for all aboard. If you were new on the boat, just the second that boat leaves the harbor, you better know that you're committed and heading to sea. The next day was rainy and drizzly, but we drove down to the beach to see if there were some of the fishermen out checking their crab pots, and here we see a boat out at sea in spite of the stormy conditions. You just put on a raincoat, which you have to wear anyway. These machines that pull the rope up, they call them crab blocks, and they put out a spray of water all the time. So a raincoat sure feels good when that spray hits you. Day and night, the crab blocks go humming away and pulling ropes or lines, they would be called, on a boat up from the briny depths of the ocean. And so you just hang in there and keep going. One time we even caught a large octopus in one of the crab traps because octopus like to eat crab, and where would be a better place to find them than in a crab pot?